Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and definitely going to be having some financial conversations going into Japan. That's
Getting
coming off of Bradley
closer.
attempting to vamp in the intro, but I just didn't know how to follow up on that. Yes, we were talking about Star Wars Celebration Japan, which we are both planning to be at.
That's right. So if you're there and you happen to see us and you somehow know what we look like, there you go.
You say that, but I have been recognized before.
That's really funny. I was going to say, I forgot. I was going to tell you this before in our pre-meeting, but I guess I'll tell you now. I'm looking into making shirts for us to wear at least one of the days. Just to as a little, like we're walking billboards. You know what I mean? Like, since we're not going to have a booth or anything like that, because A, I think we definitely missed the opportunity to do that already. And then B, I don't want to sit there all day because I was reading the requirements and it says someone has to be there the whole entire day of that one convention. I'm like, what do I want to walk around and do shit? Like,
I mean, maybe if the shirts turn out really well, we look into doing some Gold Squadron branded merchandise. I would love a Gold Squadron branded coffee mug, personally, for me. I have one of the Divas coffee mugs. It's great.
If I can design a really cute one, then maybe I'll make like a Printify shop or something, and then we'll link it in our podcast description, and then people can just if they want to get a mug, they can get a mug. You know what I mean? And we'll do something like that.
Yeah, that would be something that I would be interested in soliciting listener feedback to see if perhaps, if we're making shirts for us to wear, then perhaps it might be nice to have some merchandise for listeners as well to help support the show. And that was a glimpse into what our pre-meetings look like. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of talking about random stuff that we both happen to be watching. Because I'm not watching the Olympics, but I am on Olympics TikTok because I think everyone's on Olympics TikTok. I don't know how you can avoid it at this point.
My roommate actually is like, I have to avoid spoilers on TikTok.
I saw somebody posting about that. Somebody posted straight up a post about the Clark Kent gymnastics guy, the pommel horse guy, who's been like the main character of the Olympics. And somebody posted a post on Facebook about him, and they had literally written spoilers for the Olympic gymnastics event.
Yeah. Because it's like watching TV. It's literally like a spoiler. Like, oh, so-and-so won at their event or whatever. And it's like, if they got a gold medal or something, it's like, it's national news,
It's just funny because I think of the Olympics as news.
Yes, it's more news to me. I don't think of it as
pop culture. It makes sense to me to be like, spoilers for the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race. I almost said RuPaul's Pod Race. Spoilers for the finale of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Right, yeah. So-and-so won. Yeah.
Spoilers for the Olympics?
I mean, it kind of is like watching.
It's kind of the same thing. This is so funny. This is such a funny moment in pop culture.
But then if you compare that to like actual like everyday sports, like say football or something like that, you don't go, oh, who won the football game last night? That's a spoiler. Don't tell me. Like, I gotta watch it when I get home. Like, no, people you either watch it live or you don't.
No, hold on, because I know people who do that. That's known people in my life. This was a thing like back when, was it TiVo or what was TiVo DVR? You used to be you used to be able to record. Okay, so kids, back in the day, before you could get things like just available whenever, you had to actually, if a game was on that you weren't going to be able to watch, you had to set your TV to record it, and then you would go back and you would watch it later. And I know people who actually would be like, yeah, I was going to work, and someone basically they wouldn't use the term spoiled, but they would say, somebody told me the end of the game and I was mad for the rest of the day.
That's crazy.
Like, that was an actual thing that would happen.
Anyway, well, it's kind of funny that we're talking about the Olympics because I think when we started this podcast, it was right after the Olympics had ended, like that, the year after. So we're really,
we started 2.5 years. We started this podcast February 2021. So we are.
Oh no, they skipped it.
Yeah, they skipped
because of
it
COVID.
because of COVID.
So you're right. We
This has
haven't
been
ever talked about Olympics ever on this show.
no, this is new.
That's crazy
I
to me
think
now
they
that I
had
think
the
about it.
Winter Olympics, but the Winter Olympics aren't as big of a deal for some
Right.
reason
Yeah,
as the
yeah, yeah,
Summer
yeah.
Olympics. And the next Summer Olympics are going to be an even bigger deal because guess where they're happening, Bradley?
That's right.
Right here in
In
LA, despite a
LA.
concerted effort to have that not be the case because we don't want them.
My roommate was saying we have to go. He's like, we have to go to LA during the. I'm
I,
like,
I
yeah,
I
everybody
will
else
say
is
when
gonna
I
try
say
that
we
too.
don't want them, it's not a universal thing.
Yeah,
I don't want them. I don't want them here. But I will say if it gets them to finish the mass transit system,
it will.
that will make it worth it.
They only have 4 years to figure it out. I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna
They're
happen.
currently building stations. There's a new station about a mile and a half from where I live, and I am elated. Bradley, I am thrilled. I
I
am
think
beyond excited for
I
this
think we're
metro
gonna get
station
the
to open.
Heir to the Empire movie before your city finishes the public transportation.
That's true. They have been needing to expand. Well, it's because so the thing is, Beverly Hills hates poor people. And unfortunately, I have the distinct displeasure of living in the neighborhood that's right next to Beverly Hills,
Sure.
which is not as nice as you would think it is. And one of the downsides is because Beverly Hills has resisted having any sort of mass transit come out here for so long. And they finally lost a battle with the city and we are getting metro stations built out here, but they're not
Okay.
going to be available until next year because I want to take the train to places like downtown and Santa Monica because I hate driving in this city. I loathe it, but I can't get on the train anywhere because that would require getting on the bus. And I hate being on the bus more than I hate driving, but I love being on the train. The train gets me all sorts of really fun and interesting places, like Tanta Space, where the Bad Batch is going in this episode.
That's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for you to
You were waiting for
transition.
the segue.
I was waiting for it, and I was like, "How is he gonna do this?" I was
We
like,
gotta
"What are you
pivot.
talking about?"
We gotta
Okay,
pivot over.
but I
Listen,
love
it's
it.
been 3 fucking years of doing this podcast. I have more hits transitioning than I have misses. Right?
Fair.
Moving from whatever bullshit we talked about in the first 10 minutes, which will undoubtedly be the first 7 minutes by the time Bradley cuts half of it out. Because Bradley does edit large portions of this show out. Anyway, speaking of the large portions of the show that Bradley doesn't edit out, you want to take us into the Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 13. 13.
Yes. Yes, we're talking about episode 13, Into the Breach. This week, the Batch prep for a gambit into enemy territory. Charles, what's one thing you liked about this episode, and one thing you did not?
Well, one thing I really liked about this episode was when they randomly started quoting Henry V by William Shakespeare.
Okay.
Once more into the breach, dear friends, once more. Or close the wall up with our English dead and sheathe their swords for lack of argument. That whole bit.
I must have missed that, obviously.
You'll have to go back and rewatch it.
Clearly.
It was definitely there. No, that is literally the only thing I can think of when I watch this. That when I see the title of this episode is the Henry VIII.
Does it have something to do with the episode or no?
It has
That you
nothing
could
to do with the episode. It's just into the breach, once more unto the breach.
Interesting.
That's the connection here. No, one thing I really liked about this episode was Rampart. Half my notes are about how much of a just shitty catty bitch Rampart is this entire episode. One thing I disliked about this episode, the Omega stuff was good. It sets up the finale really well. It is a bit weird to have it interspersed in with the rest of the episode. I almost kind of wish that the Omega scene that's in the middle of the episode had been at the end. I wish they'd done what the Dr. Pershing episode did, to be honest. Like, that was the only thing, and it's not even a nitpick. It's maybe there's a way we could have reordered this, because having her scenes dropping in the middle, she doesn't really have like an arc so much in this episode as she basically figures out, or maybe one more Omega scene in the middle would have also helped. Like if there was like a little bit where she's really trying with the kids, but the kids are really dejected, like really hammer that home. I don't know. This is super nitpicky because we're in this portion of the show where these have stopped being episodes.
They're just
and they've just ever since the end of really honestly ever since Identity Crisis. The rest of the show is one long story that's been just chopped up into arcs, which is good, which is fine. Each episode has its own consistent arc with the exception of the next one. But there's still broader parts of this greater meta narrative that's going on, and pieces of it have to play more into that broader narrative than to the actual episode itself. I don't know. One thing that you really liked and one thing you did not.
One thing I really liked about this episode was use of comedy with Rampart being like in the one particular scene where they give him a uniform and it's not the same ring. We'll get to it when we get to it. I just thought that was
I literally have it in my notes.
Okay, that was one of the funniest parts of the episode. I'm sorry. That was just so hilarious that he was so dejected about being a captain. That's hilarious. That was my favorite part of the episode. One thing I did not like about the episode, I'm kind of with you on the Omega stuff. But I also like, I can't tell you how to do it differently that would make it better, because I feel like if you put it at the beginning of the episode, then it's kind of like, or if you put all of it at the beginning of the episode, then it's kind of like, well, that's the content of next week's episode. Like they're setting that up really. Then if you put it at the end, then you take out the dramaticness of the, are they going to be able to get on the ship and go to hyperspace kind of thing at the very, very end. Like it's very like, ooh, are they going to make it last minute? And I feel like you take that away if you put anything else at the end of the episode. So I don't know. I unless maybe they did more of like a bigger, like they just kept it all together, but they just put it at a different place. I think maybe that might have made it better. I don't really know. Maybe in the middle of the episode, they should have done it somewhere, like kind of like take a break from the action of them sneaking on the ship or something like that, and then been like, let's show all of Omega's stuff, and then okay, now we know what Omega's plan is. Boom, now Rampart and them approach the base and they try to sneak on the base kind of thing. And that was the finale kind of thing. That's how I probably would have done it. Then the beginning is prepping for that. The middle is Omega stuff. And then the end was them getting off the base and getting to hyperspace. I think that's how I probably would have.
Another potential restructuring idea, and I just thought of it, is to take all the Omega stuff out of this episode.
Just put it at the beginning of next week.
And put it at the beginning of next week. Well, because next week, we'll also see next week, like a lot of Omega stuff from that one is Omega crawls through vents.
Fair.
And I also think it would have called back to the beginning of the season, possibly. Remember, we had that whole episode where Omega wasn't there. Like, we had the Confined, and then we had the one episode where she wasn't there. And one thing we talked about is maybe, like, shifting these episodes around. I don't know. We'll talk about it when we talk about the broader recaps of, like, the structure of this season.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, too. I guess you're right. They could have done more of the next week's stuff all together, because it's kind of all this a little bit the same. So we'll see when we get to next week's. But
before we dive into our full coverage of this episode, my notes have helpfully reminded me I do have a thing Charles fucked up, and it's a hilarious thing Charles fucked up.
Okay.
Like, it's an incredible piece of Charles fucking up. So last week we had an entire conversation about the fact that I should do an approach with no power to something. We said a planet, the planet drop, on For Light and Dice, which is the TTRPG podcast set in the High Republic era on which I appear. Hope, was kind enough to point out to me, because she had recently re-listened to the current arc that we are on. So currently what we're doing is the party has split, and Hope and I, for the last several months, have just been recording breakout sessions with just us. She pointed out that I have already done this. It was not to a planet, it was to a space station. But at the beginning of the current arc, the 1 in 2000, which is the ship that my character is flying, has to make an approach to a space station, and in order to avoid detection, we did it by coasting in. And we did it by shutting down all the power to the ship, except for, like, the life support, and coasting into the station to avoid detection by sensors.
Oh, so
we have we've already done that.
Yeah,
we haven't dropped a ship through the atmosphere, but then we also, at time of recording, have not made it to Jeddah yet. So that might also happen when we get to Jeddah. I don't know. I have a premonition that we're going to end up crashing on Jeddah, but we'll see. At the rate things are going, we'll see. But yes, Hope was kind enough to correct me that we have already done an approach to a object at no power. This
I
is a
like it.
tactic that when my character has already used. Anyway, let's talk about this episode of The Bad Batch.
Section 1. We begin on Tanta's base, where Omega and the children gather at tables in the vault. Omega introduces herself to Ava. She mentions that Emery, the only kind adult, gave her a Tuca doll. Jax confirms that the adults above are always watching. When Omega asks how long they've been there, Sammy indicates that the Imperials discourage everyone from talking to each other, and Jax warns that causing trouble makes things worse. Sammy reassures Omega that she will get used to the situation.
I like how Omega is immediately good with the kids. Like, she has a lot of empathy as a character, and so she's immediately trying to, like, connect with these kids, bond over the doll. She's trying with them. So I do like that about her.
I also like how she wasn't like, oh, that's my doll that I made. And it's interesting that Emery gave it to you because I made it. Like, she didn't say that, but you could see it in her face. Like, oh, I like that Emery gave that to you because that means something. I don't know if she knows that she got through to Emery in that moment, but like,
I think
there's
she
something
does.
there.
And I think this will come up later. This is a later note. Well, because Lula was Wrecker's originally.
Correct.
And Omega at the time needed Lula more than Wrecker did. And so she got to carry this doll around. And so now Omega's in the position of having to be the older kid. So this doll, clearly Ava needs it more than Omega did. And so Omega's like, she's not trying to come in and get territorial. She's not trying to be like, that's my doll. You know, do anything that would take this away because this is Ava's doll. No matter who the doll belonged to before, Ava needs this comfort in this place, particularly at the low point we're going to find out that these kids are. My only other note for this scene is that how do they know the baby's name?
That was my thing. I was like, wait a minute.
I have a theory.
Well, my only in-universe explanation is that technically all these kids are force sensitive, or they're supposed to be anyway, because they all have high M counts, so they just kind of intuitively know what the baby's name is. Or somehow it's a Grogu Ahsoka situation where the baby told them somehow.
I think Emery told them.
How would Emery know the baby?
Because
Cad Bane wasn't like, this is so-and-so's baby, here you go. Like,
well, I think Cad Bane did.
did he?
Yeah, because it's not like they're not going to report some of these things. It's not like they're not going to report the mom. It's
true.
not like they're not going to report the planet. Like, there's a paper trail, there's data here. So Emery probably knows all the kids' real names.
That's true.
She knows their names. She probably knows where they came from. So she probably told the kids what the name was, which is another clue that Emery's not like totally on team.
Let's number them and forget about
Team
it.
Let's number them and forget about it.
Okay, I like that explanation better. I mean, it's, other than just they know the baby's name. Because I don't know, we never heard the baby's name in the original episode it was introduced in, so I would imagine that they just kind of came up with a name for the baby.
That's another possibility, is
you know what I mean?
They just named the kid.
Yeah, just named him. I don't know.
Either way, it's interesting to think about. I really want to see like a Stories of Light and Dark for the Bad Batch with some of these episodes, to where we like get a writer to go in and fill in some of these details. Because there's a great Stories of Light and Dark on the episode Hostage Crisis. This is an episode of the Clone Wars where a bunch of bounty hunters take a bunch of senators hostage to secure Zero the Hutt's release. And it's complicated because Anakin is also there, but also Anakin has given Padme his lightsaber, so she has his lightsaber hidden on her person while the bounty hunter's there. It's a good episode. But the episode doesn't account for the fact that Cad Bane and Anakin have met, because the episode in which they meet did not air until after the Senate Hostage Crisis episode. So they did a Stories of Light and Dark that went back and added some internal monologue for Anakin about the fact that he knows who Cad Bane is in this episode.
Interesting.
So I want to see him do that with some episodes of this show.
I guess it's weird because I never watched Clone Wars in order that it appeared. I've only watched it in timeline order because when I went to go actually watch it, I was like, let me watch it in order because I didn't want to be confused while I was watching the show. And so I've only ever watched it in chronological order. I've never watched it in release order. So that's interesting that there's stuff like that where like they don't meet him until 3 episodes after this episode is actually coming out. But that's confusing and weird. But okay, interesting.
I'm gonna have a hilarious thing that I fucked up later on in this episode. I'm just realizing looking at my notes. But you can take us into the next section.
Okay. A little spoiler for
Little
what Charles
little spoiler. Little spoiler, but Charles was
spoiling.
looking at his notes and realized he did fuck something up in his thing he disliked.
Section 2. On a gas-covered world, Rampart questions Hunter's decision to bring him to such a desolate place. Echo arrives on a stolen transport shuttle bringing necessary supplies. Echo distrusts Rampart, but Hunter insists he is their best chance to find Omega. Aboard the shuttle, Rampart explains that the ship to Tantus Base must first dock at an Imperial station orbiting Coruscant, where coordinates are transmitted directly to the navigation computer. Hunter proposes infiltrating the station to find a ship departing for Tantus and pulling its coordinates. Crosshair and Hunter reveal a plan to disguise Rampart as an Imperial officer and themselves as a security detail.
So that gas planet is called Boravio, and we've been here before.
Oh, is this the one where Fennec and Cad Bane almost caught Omega? Is that what it is? Okay,
Yep,
I thought it looked familiar.
This is the one where they had their bounty hunter fight over her.
Honestly, we were robbed of that happening again this season.
We were robbed of that happening again.
They were both here this season, and then they both had just had fuck all episodes by themselves.
God, that was a good episode of season 1. But we're on the same planet.
Yeah, okay. I thought it looked familiar.
Yeah, that's what that is. And the databank does confirm that it is Boravio. Let's play my favorite game for what I think will probably be the last time. For real this time.
Okay.
Let's play Whose Goddamn White Baby Is That? It's the part of the show where I, a white person, watches The Bad Batch on, in this case, my computer, but generally on my HD TV. And I tell you how fucking white the people are. And I do have another pleasant report that there's a wonderful shot of kind of Hunter in the foreground, and then you can see Wrecker, Rampart, and Crosshair in the background. Rampart's very white, which does make sense. But you can also see that Crosshair and Wrecker are both notably darker than Rampart is, which is very cool to see.
Yeah, I guess if they're standing next to him, you can notice.
When you put them next to pale-ass Rampart,
yes,
it does highlight the fact that these are not white people. Which is a cool shot. I wanted to point out that shot. Speaking of Rampart, all the rest of my notes of this episode are about his petty gay sniping. Or this section are his petty gay sniping.
He's the best character.
his little, I can hear you.
Right. Also,
yeah, we fucking
the
know.
fact that he thinks that he still has agency is really interesting. That I love that he doesn't see himself as a prisoner. He doesn't see himself as like hostage. He doesn't see himself as like, he still thinks he's in control somehow.
He really does, which is such an interesting thing for him.
It's that imperial like hubris that he just like doesn't understand that like he's not the main character. He's not in charge.
This is a captain's uniform. I was a vice admiral.
Okay.
You've been demoted. I fucking love this episode. Like,
this is the best part.
If Identity Crisis weren't such an interesting episode, this one would be my favorite. Honestly. Actually, no. This one would be tied with Shadows of Tantus for my favorite.
Interesting.
I think I love Shadows of Tantus and I love Into the Breach for different reasons. And the reason I love Into the Breach is because it's so fucking funny.
I love that. Okay, so I have two things about this. So the first thing is like, obviously this is hilarious. He's like, I wanted an Imperial, Admiral outfit. My favorite part about this is Echo is like, I just stole this shuttle and I got you an Imperial outfit to actually genuinely blend in. And you're complaining that I got you a captain's uniform. Where am I going to find a vice admiral's uniform? Like, I just don't think that's something that's super common to be able to steal. So I just find it very funny that like Echo gets no recognition in this episode for all the hard work he did.
I also do think it's funny that Rampart spends most of his time nitpicking the plan and like being like, well, that's not going to work. Well, this isn't going to work. He's going to spend the whole episode doing this. But we also see that he's really good at his specific portion of the plan. Like, props to him. The one thing they have him doing, he's really good at. But everything else, he's like, this isn't going to work. And then it works. We can't do this. And then they do it.
Yeah. Other than what he's being used for, he's truly dead weight. I mean, he doesn't He can't fight anybody. He can't, break into anything. He can't lift anything. He can't, do all the things the Bad Batch can do. All he can do is pretend to be an Imperial. And that's literally the best part about
The
it.
thing about the Imperials is they can't improvise. Their system discourages improvisation and individuality, whereas the Batch prizes individuality above almost all else, which all the clones do, but the Batch especially have always worked under this system of individuality within their unit. And I think that's part of why Rampart struggles so much to wrap his head around the versatility of the plan. That he literally cannot think that way because he is a dyed-in-the-wool Imperial. And Imperials love regulations. They love rule books. They love structure. And the rebels operate, successful rebels operate by disrupting and infiltrating that structure and being flexible within it. Because the Imperial system is not designed to play whack-a-mole like that. And when the Alliance to Restore the Republic really kicks up and gets going, this is part of how they win, is by being flexible and by using this Imperial rigidity. But we've also seen other cases, like in Andor, in Star Wars Rebels, when we have these successful missions against the Empire, they often have to be flexible, and they rely on the team trusting each other and being very good at what they do.
Section 3. At Tantus Base, Emery prepares to extract a blood sample from Omega, who questions her about the children. Omega steals a small metal tool while the medical droid collects her blood. In the observation deck, Dr. Scalder objects to Omega mingling with the other children, but Emery defends it and asserting her authority as chief scientist. Omega mingles with the other children, asking about the movement of droids and troopers, and Omega reveals she has escaped before and promises to take the kids with her.
This is the thing Charles fucked up earlier, because for some reason, despite having watched the episode literally immediately prior to recording this episode, I somehow missed there were 3 Omega scenes. I lumped this one in with the next one.
Okay, see, that's why I was confused when you were saying that, because I was like, it's really interdispersed throughout the episode. So I was like, when I was saying what I would have done structurally is I would have put it all together, because it kind of does. This one and the other one, it's just her talking to the kids again. They could have just kept it. It's like the same scene, just slightly different. I don't know why they didn't just keep. Honestly, this is the scene they should have kept. I think the first scene isn't that important. You could have even kept in the doll scene with this new.
What gets me is that the purpose of these scenes is trying to show that the kids were super dejected and Omega brings them some hope. Like, that was the point here. And that's why I think that first scene is important, because we do need to see Omega being we need to see Ava being sort of dejected. But I don't know.
You could have combined these two.
Yeah.
Think about it. Because if you had done Omega introduces herself, they're like, oh no, we're sad, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, okay. And then Emery comes in, interrupts them in that conversation. She's doing the blood sample thing. Omega steals the tool during that blood sample thing. Then she goes back to the kids and she's like, I got to tell you guys something. I've escaped before. And then they're like, oh, what? And then now they have some hope, right? That's the whole scene.
And I wonder. It's also weird, I think, interspersed within the context of this episode, because the batch section moves so fast.
Right.
Like, if the idea was this is supposed to be taking place over a period of time, that would be one thing. But for Omega, at least, this is happening in the span of maybe a couple hours. She's brought in.
Yeah, and it's like one day. Yeah, one full day.
This is all happening. And she wakes up. She's clearly been there for overnight. But yeah, this whole thing is happening. I think these next 3 episodes are happening pretty much within the same day.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's all that long of a time frame, because I think in the next episode they immediately are on Tantus, and it's like they had just come out of hyperspace, and we don't really know how long the hyperspace to planet really takes. I mean, we've seen it a couple times in, I think, different media, but
it takes as long as the plot needs it to take.
Right, exactly. Like, it could be 30 seconds, it can be a day, it can be whatever. It just depends on whatever they need it to be. And it just seems like, yeah, it's like 3 days worth of content in 3 episodes. Like, it's like, okay, like the whole entire finale is like less than 4 days long. I mean, it's like, it just seems that it happens so quickly.
Let's talk about Dr. Carr. Because here's my thing, right? There is absolutely no fucking way in hell, to me, that the chief scientist who worked with Omega for 5 months knows Omega has escaped before and definitely has a strong attention to detail. Left a tray of lockpicking tools next to her by accident.
Also, it didn't notice one of the tools was missing.
And didn't notice one of the tools. She knew. She 100% knew. She turns around and gives Omega this look afterwards. No words are exchanged, but she turns around, she gives her this look, and the next shot is we see that Omega has the tool next to her. So yeah, Dr. Carr definitely slipped Omega a tool to be able to get out.
Okay, I believe it.
Like, at this point, Dr. Carr is fully on team. These kids need to get the fuck out of here.
Right, but I also think that she's doing it in a way that she's not directly responsible for them getting out. She's kind of like, oh, well, I just looked the other
Plausible
way.
deniability, baby.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very much so like in that vein of like, well, I didn't turn the key that opened the door, but I accidentally left the key. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of one of those things. Like, it's like, well, I didn't really do anything wrong, kind of thing. So it's very interesting. Although I do want to shout out Dr. Scalder on the other
That was
hand.
my next note.
Because she is like, first of all, a fucking genius. Because she's like, I don't think it's a smart idea to have Omega in the same room with these people. You know what, Dr. Scalder? You're absolutely fucking correct.
You're completely correct.
The only competent person on this base is Dr. Scalder, clearly, because she's like, treat them as numbers, don't socialize. Like, did it like she's very much like, this is the way for success. If you want to be successful, do these steps. And everybody else is like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Like,
well, Emery pulls rank, and that's the thing about this system is rank means things. As Emery is the chief scientist, she could very easily have Dr. Scalder reassigned. She could have her demoted. She could have her imprisoned if she wanted to.
Yeah, just for going against anything she said.
Just for going against anything she says. So Carr is now using the system to be able to give Omega this chance to escape, which I think is very cool.
To be fair, Dr. Carr has I'm in charge glasses on. So I mean,
she does have the I'm in charge glasses on.
Have you noticed that her glasses don't look like anybody else's for some reason? Like, it's just like hers are the red, like with the grids on them. And I'm like, first of all, I need to know what the purpose of these goggles are, because I don't think they serve any other purpose other than just being cool. Like,
they're to be sci-fi goggles.
Yeah, they're just like, I don't know what they do, but I just find it interesting. But some of the other doctors have goggles on. They just don't have the red, cool kind of design. I just thought that was interesting. One last thing I wanted to point out. I didn't point it out in the first scene, but it was there. I think a couple episodes back, we were questioning whether or not like the scientists or the doctors on the base were A, clones, or B, all female. And there was one guy at the beginning of the episode, just random doctor guy.
Okay.
Like 70s style, look. And he was in like this in the vault, area.
Okay.
So I'm like,
so they are not all women.
No, and it's just random people. They're not clones or anything. So I think Emery is the only clone that is a quote unquote scientist or person working that we've seen. Just to debunk that any of them are actual clones doing things to other clones.
It's just Emery, yeah. And okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Speaking of the kids are really dejected in this scene. And it's interesting because Omega now has to, again, going back to what we talked about in her first scene, now step up and be the older and more experienced kid. Because it's her job to raise morale now. It's her job to say, I've gotten out of here before. It's her job to kind of rally these kids who Jax tried to get out and it didn't work. So these kids are, if Omega had not been introduced into this ecosystem, the kids would have not tried to escape again. And yet Omega's here, which again, Scalder is correct. She's not wrong.
I'm surprised they even let her talk to the kids.
Yeah, she's just not chief scientist.
And if she had been, maybe this would have gone differently.
But fortunately, she is not.
Section 4. As the shuttle approaches the Imperial Station, Rampart and the Batch disguise themselves and Echo secures landing clearance. Hunter warns that they must act quickly before their stolen shuttle is reported missing. Hunter assigns Wrecker to stay aboard and monitor the comms, and an Imperial officer confronts them about their shuttle not being on the manifest. Rampart asserts himself and invokes Governor Tarkin's name, leading the officer to back down. Inside, Rampart leads them to the control room. Inside, Echo accesses the computer. Meanwhile, Wrecker knocks out a lieutenant from before, and Echo discovers that there is a science vessel that is scheduled to depart for Tantus soon. Hunter proposes boarding that science vessel to reach Omega, despite Rampart's warning about heightened security. Echo volunteers to infiltrate the ship and disable its proximity sensor.
I like how the Batch has to go back to basics. Like, we're back to the basic armor. We're back to how the batch basically functions. We're
I
back
like
to a
the
4-man team because Echo's here now. Rampart
I
doesn't count.
I like how they had to strip the armor because it makes it seem like, well, one, it looks slightly more regulation. I mean, it's not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more uniform, right? They're all wearing black. There's no individual paint colors. There's no like, here's a marking of a skull on my helmet or whatever. Like, it makes them all look semi normal, semi uniform, I guess. I don't know. It's still a little questionable to me, but they should have, I think it would have actually been more interesting had they had actual stormtrooper outfit and they were wearing stormtrooper outfits. I thought that would have been more interesting.
I think they're doing the best they could at this point. And also I think that they were going to have to fight when they got to Tantus anyway, so it makes
True.
sense for them to kind of have their own armor at that point. The black is good enough that they can kind of bluff in. I don't think Death Troopers are quite a thing yet
Right.
because we had the squad back in season 1.
That's true, but they were fairly
But
new,
they
so
were
I don't
fairly
think people.
new. Death Troopers
Right.
are not like a thing yet.
Right, because they haven't trained enough of them, or they're not like a.
But it is
Yeah,
notable that nobody really notices them wandering around in this armor once they're past the lieutenant.
that's true. I mean, you can see the looks. Like, I feel like people give them dirty looks, but they don't say anything. They're just like, oh, that's something that I've never seen, but okay.
The shuttle they are in is a Rho class shuttle. RHO for my High Republic girlies, not RO. I do just want to shout out the Rho class transport shuttle. It is going to get destroyed in the next episode. This is the first time I think it is identified as a Rho class shuttle. It first turned up actually in the Clone Wars season 5 during the worst arc of the show. And also my boyfriend's favorite arc, the D Squad arc. So I thought it had just shown up in the Bad Batch, but no, it's actually in Clone Wars and it's in Son of Dathomir, the comic series that adapted some unproduced episodes. Every single piece of Rampart's animation is hilarious and fun. And I'm especially talking about the bit where Hunter like pats him on the shoulder and then like Rampart reaches over and like brushes his shoulder off. Which is so interesting because these are not real people walking around on these sets and making acting choices. Every bit, every eye roll, every shrug, every brushing his shoulder off, all of that is deliberate choices by the animators.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing to think about. Is that like they have to think about that stuff? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just a weird concept to think about because you're right. Actors can do stuff randomly or not think about stuff, and or they do very thoughtfully think about things, and they're like, oh, my character, if somebody touched his shoulder, he would be like, ugh, like wipe that off. You're like lesser than me. Like I gotta wipe off the dirt off my shoulder. But the animators have to go, no, that's what Rampart would do. So like we're gonna have Hunter touch him, and then it's like, ugh, like don't touch me. Like visceral reaction.
Yeah, actors are actually very smart people, and the craft of acting is actually incredibly difficult to do because you do have to be constantly thinking all of the time about everything, every choice that you make. The acting classes that I had to take in college, it was drilled into us over and over and over again that acting is a series of choices. And when you don't have a physical actor on set, it is down to the animators to make those choices. So animators are really cool, and animators are great. We love them. And they should be paid an appropriate amount of money and be given the working conditions that are good for them to be able to make the animation. I may or may not be referencing current events that are happening. Just saying, animators are great. Pay them money. Don't overwork them. Throwing that out there. I once again love the scene where Rampart walks up to this Imperial lieutenant and basically bullies him into letting them by. Because again, one of my favorite facts about real life fascist regimes, and in particular Germany, was that you could get away with a lot of shit just by yelling at people. Because these systems are designed where you don't want to cause a stir. You
Right.
don't want to be seen as someone who's creating issues. And so Rampart coming up here and yelling at this guy and invoking Tarkin's name, it's not just about, oh, you might get attention from Governor Tarkin. It's you might get attention from the system overall, which
Right.
would be a problem. So you can actually bully fascists into doing this kind of stuff by basically just making a scene and being like, well, I want to talk to people who are in charge. Do you know who I am? I have these connections to this person, particularly if you're someone important. you can get away with a lot just by yelling at them. And that's one of my favorite flaws in these sorts of systems is you can just sort of yell at people.
I can compare this really, actually, it's almost a scene for scene if you think about it. This scene where he's yelling at the lieutenant matches with in the Kenobi show where she's sneaking on the base.
Tala bullies that guy into
She
letting her
bullies the
past.
guy to
Yeah.
get on the Inquisitor base. And I thought about it. I was like, she does the same thing. I think she's actually wearing a captain uniform and he's a lieutenant or something like that. It's very similar dynamic where it's like she's a higher rank. And just because she's the higher rank and she just says
Mhm.
anything, he has to go with whatever she says. Like, and same thing here. He didn't, I don't know if he needed to say Governor Tarkin's name. It didn't hurt the situation by any means because the guy clearly is afraid. But I think also when he calls him lieutenant, it's almost like a dig. It's like
Yeah. It's a
like,
reminding you,
yeah,
you are below me in the system.
right. And if
I
you
can
mess
make a
up,
lot of
yeah, I
trouble
can
for
make it. Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Don't make waves.
I
We're
love that.
doing what I want, which is an incredible scene. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Tala scene in Obi-Wan Kenobi. I also love their continued gay sniping. That's do your thing, sir. I wrote down as a particular hilarious line. Wrecker remains as bad at bluffing as ever, but as good as beating the shit out of Imperials.
Always.
I also love that the plan that they ultimately come up with to get to Tantus is so batshit insane that they have no plan number for it.
They're like,
They
we
have
just came to
never
this now.
tried this.
Yeah, yeah. This is Plan 100 because this is
This is
it's just
Plan 100.
right. Section 5. At Tantus Base, Omega removes blocks leading to the dumbwaiter just as Dr. Scalder investigates her movements, but Omega manages to hide her handiwork before and tells the other children her escape plan is working. Back at the Imperial Space Station, Echo enters the science vessel's hangar via a suction tube used by astromech droids, and the ship initiates a launch sequence. The clones of Rampart return to their shuttle, and Echo disables the proximity sensors, allowing the batch's shuttle to attach to the science vessel right before it jumps into hyperspace.
I have two specific things I want to shout out about this final Omega scene. Number
Okay.
one is the interspersing of the shots between the top shot of Tantus, the top down shot of Tantus, into the room where Omega and the kids are being held is legitimately genius. That is an incredible, incredible cut. The number two thing I want to shout out, I gotta say it. I gotta say it, Bradley. The Kiner score is absolutely popping the fuck off in this episode. They're so good in this show.
It is. It really is.
They're all so good in this show. Oh my god. I love how when Echo is like caught by the astromech droid, that droid's like, I ain't seen shit. Bye. I'm not paid enough to deal with this.
Like, no, I don't know what you're talking
I
about.
saw nothing. I heard nothing. I was not here.
I wasn't here.
I also love Wrecker wearing the lieutenant's hat when he's dumping the lieutenant's body.
He's like, this makes a good souvenir.
And then my final and only real substantial note for this scene is that this is legitimately one of the coolest sequences that this show has done.
I thought so too. I thought the tension in this scene, even though like in my brain, I know that they're gonna get it. Like they're gonna go. I mean, there's only 3 episodes, what, 3 episodes left, including this one, so it's really only 2 episodes left. They have to get to Tantus. Like we're wasting too much time. Like there can't be another episode where it's like, let's figure out how to get to Tantus. Like we know they're gonna get there, right? However, the the tension of the proximity thing is not down yet. The like they're about to launch, like it's getting closer and closer and closer to the last possible second, and then Rampart's like, it's you're not gonna make it, you're not gonna make it, you're not gonna make it, and then Hunter's like, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, and it's just like, and they attach right as they are able to
It's
jump.
perfect.
I was genuinely like,
perfectly-
yeah, I was like, oh my god, this is so good.
It's an incredibly directed scene. Speaking of which, this episode was directed by Saul Ruiz and written by Brad Rao, who is the supervising director for the entire series.
Oh wow, okay.
Alrighty. Bradley, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
I thought it was a pretty decent episode. I think it ramped up pretty well. I think that, compared to last week, it's setting up these finale beats. So, we've gotten Rampart. Now we need to get the coordinates to Tantus / get to Tantus. And then we're going to be like, let's set up Omega, escaping and then the finale, right? So we're really hitting those beats for the finale, and I think this is a really good episode. It's a really good like, stepping stone to the finale. I thought the action was good. I thought the comedy was good. I probably, like I said, I think I would have just shrunk all the Omega stuff into one scene, and I probably would have just put it either at the beginning of the episode or like right before the end, and then still had this part at the end. I still think that this was the stronger ending, the jump to space. But I definitely, I probably would have put the Omega stuff at the beginning. I think that's what I would have done. I think I would have taken all of it, truncated it into one, maybe slightly longer scene, but I don't think you really needed all four of them. Like, I think they were like, two of them are too much the same, and they could have been shrunk together. It's just, like, I think it was just too much of a spacing out. I think they cheated it a little bit. But other than that, I thought it was a solid B episode.
I love this episode. It might be my third favorite episode of the season. Next week, we're covering The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 14. We're almost fucking done with this show. And it's actually called something else.
Flash Strike.
It's called Flash Strike. Pluggables. Bradley does reality TV, and you can find his stuff on Bravo and Peacock. We do whatever the previous show that came out was, not the last show he worked on, because we can't talk about that one.
Yep.
But the last show he had that came out was The Circle, which you can watch season 6 on Netflix now. I am also a cast member, as mentioned before, who does not remember his own show on the Star Wars TTRPG actual play podcast For Light and Dice, which is set in the High Republic era. I'm on there with our buddy Chris from Darkside Divas and Holodeck Divas, Hope from J Guys and Jedi and the Geeky Waffle, Jess from RuPaul's Pod Race, Colton from Nerdsmith, and our friend Robin. I also write a series of queer mystery thriller novels. The second book is out now. The series overall is called Beach House Studios. The Beach House is one H, one word. And the second book, which is called Second Shoot, that came out when you're listening to this 2 days ago. Oh, 2 days ago. So it came out the day we're recording this, which is why Bradley's getting unshaven, messy Charles, because he woke up and has been dealing with things all morning and did not prepare adequately for this podcast. So you can check that out now. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited. You buy it and to give me money.
Okay.
Bradley still has his ARC, but he hasn't indicated to me that he's started it yet.
I have not started it yet, so I'm trying to keep the suspense alive.
You're trying to drag this out so that we can keep these promos interesting.
That's true. I do feel like if I start it too soon and I finish it too soon, then we'd have to be like, okay, well, the second book is out. Okay, next. Like,
okay, next.
It'll be more interesting if I can like space out, because it will take me at least.
It will take you at least 2 months. Yeah. You'll finish the second one right around the time the third one's coming out.
I was gonna say I'll try. You know what? My goal is to finish it by Christmas. How about that? That's what I mean.
Okay. My goal is to try to have the next one out by around Christmas. So
okay, well then there you go.
There we go. And I am planning, there is another book with my name on it that is coming out. We're trying to get it out by the end of the year, but it is unrelated to this. It is a separate thing, and I will talk about it when I have more concrete information on it. God, I do so many things. And then I have another thing that I can't even talk about on the podcast yet.
I mean, I've done 2 things that I can't talk about on the podcast. A third thing now is coming up. So it's like one of those things where it's like, you can't talk about anything until you can talk about it.
I want to talk about the other cool things that I'm doing, but I can't talk about them yet. Maybe we'll talk about them in future episodes. But for now, you can find all the things that Bradley and I do by going to the socials, which Bradley is now going to run. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at @GoldSquadGaze, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at @GoldSquadronGaze. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gaze YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze, and we'll see you next week.
Unrelated, but related. I saw a TikTok of a guy. I think he's the pole vaulting competition. There's a guy. I think it's France. He jumped over the pole thing or whatever, and then his dick caught on the pole at the top and it fell off. And then someone in the comments said, imagine losing out on a medal because your dick's too big. I thought it was so fucking funny.
This?
Please look it up. Look it up for educational purposes only, everyone. Please look up France guy pole vaulting. You're gonna see it, and it's honestly magical. And honestly, it was worth losing that medal, I have to say.